Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about my most anticipated releases for January to March. Now normally I would tend to do these towards the end of the preceding month, so December. But as we know, December especially tends to be quite a quiet period, and for the releases that I'm looking at, actually January is also looking like a pretty quiet month for publications. So I thought I could afford to push this off until the new year. So apologies if you are holding out for this one, but I did want to give myself a little bit of a break in December. But I do have quite a few books to talk to you about today, so without much further ado, let's just get straight into these books. First off, we have The Beholders. This is by Hester Musson. It is coming out on the 18th of January, and this is one that I actually found out about through Katie Lumsden. This is Gothic historical fiction set around the 1870s, in which a young boy is found dead after he's pulled out of the Thames, and his mother is accused of the crime. We then flash back 4 months prior, in which we come across the maid who has just started working there, working very intimately with this mother and finding out that all is not as it seems within this house. Next up, coming out on the 25th of January, we have All the Violet Tiaras, Queering the Greek Myths by Jean Meuniers, who you will know as Jean over at Bookish Things. This is just a little short non-fiction in which Jean is talking about the recent proliferation of Greek myth retellings which particularly look at these myths through a queer lens. Whether that's looking at the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus, whether it's looking into Sappho's poetry, why this is so pertinent and why it is so meaningful, and why it adds even more depth and understanding to what we know about Greek mythology. Another non-fiction coming out on the 1st of February is Dark Brilliance, The Age of Reason from Descartes to Peter the Great by Paul Stathern. This is in particular looking at the period between the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment, looking particularly at the 17th century and what has been dubbed the Age of Reason. Even though this is a more neglected area, this is an area which saw advances through arts and sciences, all the while many of these countries which were making these great advances were importing slaves at the same time of extolling the virtues of liberty. In this we're looking at Caravaggio, Rembrandt, Newton, Descartes, Spinoza, Louis XIV and Charles I as per the blurb. As I've said before, the 17th century is an area of history that I do tend to neglect. I always joke that I'm an early modernist with the 17th century taken out, but I do need to expose myself more and more to histories of this time period, and hopefully it will make me have a greater appreciation. Another historical fiction that I'm looking forward to coming out on the 1st of February is Maude Horton's Glorious Revenge by Lizzie Pook. In this we are following the main character of Maude, who finds out that her sister Constance has disappeared under mysterious circumstances while she was travelling through the Arctic, and even though the authorities have said that it was just an accident, Maude believes there may have been foul play, particularly after she discovers Constance's journal. And so Maude Horton decides to go on a quest for her sister and potentially for revenge as well. Next up we have a romance book coming out from Ali Hazelwood, one of BookTube's favourite, or sometimes least favourite, romance novelists. This Ali Hazelwood is called Bride, and instead of Ali Hazelwood's usual contemporary love stories, we're actually looking at a bit of a supernatural twist, which sees a pairing between a vampire bride and a werewolf. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, that is not the kind of romance that I typically go for. I either go for historical romance or contemporary. I don't tend to go for much supernatural, aside from maybe at Halloween. However, the fact that it's Ali Hazelwood is making me a little bit more tempted, just because I'm a bit of a completionist. You know, I have an Ali Hazelwood right here. I have to collect them all like Pokemon. So I don't know if I'll be picking this up straight away or if I'll be waiting for Halloween, but rest assured I will definitely be getting to this one. Once again, can't keep me down, back to the historical fiction. Coming out on the 8th of February is The Bone Hunters by Joanne. In this book we are particularly looking at a relationship between two fossil hunters, Ada Winter, an amateur hunter, and Dr. Edwin Moyle, who is a geologist, hoping to find a discovery that will put him on the map. However, when they do make a discovery, that's when trouble starts a brewing. I don't know much more about this one, but I get the sense that sexism is definitely going to play a part in maybe Ada not getting the credit that she deserves. Though you always hope that that's not going to be the case and that Edwin is actually going to be a good egg, but I'll have to read it to find out. We were never going to get through this video without a Greek myth retelling or two, and one coming out on the 13th of February is Medea by Eilish Quin. I've been reading quite a lot of Clytemnestra retellings recently, another one of Greek mythology's famous villainesses, but Medea is also pretty high up on that list of villainous women. And I love how these Greek myth retellings take these figures who are often reviled and put a bit of a feminist twist on them and give you a perspective that maybe you hadn't considered before, and that's really what I'm hoping for with this Medea retelling. Coming out on the 14th of February, very appropriate for Valentine's Day, is Love and Marriage in the Age of Jane Austen by Rory Muir, which really does, as it says on the tin, non-fiction looking at the rules and conventions around love and marriage in the Regency period and how this would have informed Jane Austen in the romance that she was writing. From the glamours of the ballroom to the pressures of careers, children, managing money and difficult in-laws, love and marriage came in many guises. Some wed happily, some dared to elope, and other relationships ended ended in acrimony, adultery, domestic abuse, or divorce. The author illuminates the position of both men and women in marriage, as well as those spinsters and bachelors who chose not to marry at all. A similar time period, but now looking at historical fiction, we have Clairmont by Lesley McDowell, which is coming out on the 29th of February. I've really been looking forward to reading Mary, or the Birth of Frankenstein, which is looking at the life of Mary Shelley. And with this book by Lesley McDowell, we'll probably have that same story, but told from the perspective of Claire Clairmont, Mary Shelley's stepsister who accompanied her and Percy Shelley and famously had an affair with Lord Byron, but I feel like is often shunted to the side, particularly in historical fiction and in film adaptations I've seen about Mary Shelley's life. But there's a lot of tragedy with Claire's story, and she doesn't even get the glowing posthumous reputation that Mary Shelley has because of her publication of Frankenstein. She's shunted to the side, seen as a silly woman for believing Lord Byron and engaging in a relationship with him, and doesn't tend to get a whole lot of sympathy from what I've seen. So I'd really love to read a book that readdresses this balance. There are a lot of offerings coming out on the 29th of February. I think everybody's looking forward to a leap year publication. And next up we have Secret Voices, A Year of Women's Diaries, edited by Sarah Gristwood. This is going, as you can imagine, from the 1st of January all the way up to the 31st of December. But on each day we are being treated to a different diary entry from a prominent woman. From Lady Anne Clifford to Anne Frank, to Anne Lister, to Alice Walker, Virginia Woolf, even to Oprah Winfrey. I just think this will be absolutely fascinating. And I am a fan already of Sarah Gristwood's writing, so I'd be really keen to read any of her annotations and her introduction to this book and provide a fantastic source and insight into women's lives. Another women's history-led book is Bluestockings, The First Women's Movement by Susannah Gibson, also coming out on the 29th. I've been looking forward to a popular history book that talks about the original Bluestockings, because every time that I hear the term Bluestocking, it's tended to mean, I think, either the 19th century or the 20th century, and not the 18th century and the original Bluestockings. We are looking at Elizabeth Montagu, Hester Frail, Anne Yearsley, and Catherine Macaulay, the original 18th century London salons where women would share literary opinions. And this really riled up 18th century men and really paved the way for the literary and intellectual pursuits of women who came after. And I'm really glad that there's a book on this. The Painter's Daughters by Emily House is historical fiction looking at the daughters of Thomas Gainsborough, another perspective that you don't typically get to see. In this book, we're looking particularly at the relationship between these two sisters, their lives being turned upside down by a relocation to Bath. We're especially looking at mental health and the lengths that family will go to protect each other. The final book I want to mention that's coming out on the 29th of February is Rites of Passage, Death and Mourning in Victorian Britain by Judith Flanders. Once again, another non-fiction that does what it says on the tin, looking at the death and mourning customs of the Victorians. Through stories from the sickbed to the deathbed, from the correct way to grieve and give comfort to those grieving, to funerals, burials, and the reaction of those left dying, Flanders illuminates how living in 19th century Britain was in so many ways dictated by dying. Coming out on the 7th of March, we have The Tower by Flora Carr, another historical fiction but looking at the life of Mary Queen of Scots. The last time that I read a historical fiction retelling of Mary Queen of Scots was Ritzio by Denise Mina. This is looking at the imprisonment of Mary Queen of Scots, but I think it might be going from the perspective of one of her ladies' maids. This one I've seen so much buzz and attention for, it's really getting a marketing push at the moment, so I feel like this one's going to be quite a big deal in the historical fiction community. I'm slowly but surely trying to learn more about music history, particularly classical music, and this book, Women and the Piano, A History in 50 Lives, coming out on the 12th of March, I think will really whet my appetite for this. I had piano lessons from the age of 7 to the age of 17. I do own a keyboard and I have one with me in Oxford, though I am notoriously bad at practicing it, but I still feel like I do have like some sort of kinship to the piano. But I don't really know much about piano history. I know there was a really good book on the history of the piano that came out a couple of years ago that I would love to read, and I just know how little I know about music history despite the fact that I love music. I also previously read Sounds and Sweet Airs by Anna Beer, which is looking at female composers who often have been pushed to the sidelines and not remembered. I think this will give me a similar flavour to that. And the final book I have to talk to you about today is another history non-fiction. It is Shakespeare's Sisters, 4 Women Who Wrote the Renaissance by Rami Targoff, looking at 4 literary Renaissance women who really inspired and shaped the age of the Renaissance in Britain, who would have been peers or maybe inspirations to Shakespeare himself. Those 4 women being Mary Sidney, Amelia Lanier, Elizabeth Carey, and Anne Clifford. Figures who I know the names of but don't know very much in depth about their lives, and I'm really keen to learn more. And this book just looks like it will be a brilliant introduction to these women. So there we go, that's a little whistle-stop tour into some really exciting books that I'm looking forward to reading. Do let me know what books you're particularly anticipating coming out between January and March, particularly if I've missed anything that you think I'd really enjoy. I would love to hear about it. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.